Finance and Audit Committee agenda on June the 1st. Can I get a motion to approve those minutes from June 1st?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Minutes are approved as written. Commissioner Malphurs is going to join us when he is available shortly. So, and Commissioner Rawlinson, of course, is on the phone, and in the room is Commissioner Miller and Commissioner, your
Cohort.
last name, I always misspell.
Cohort.
Okay. First item, or next item on the agenda are the contracts over 200,000. And Pat is going to lead us off on that discussion.
Okay. Hopefully, the report in front of you, we have 4 contracts to talk about today. The first 3 are new non-service contracts of 200,000 or greater. The first one is solicitation ending with 196. I would consider this a routine fixed bid solicitation for direct support professionals. It is a $250,000 ceiling. It's like we talked about before. It offers vendors an opportunity to qualify to be awarded a contract. But the caveat is, just because they're qualified and awarded does not mean we're going to necessarily purchase from them. That just gives us the opportunity to choose from them because they're pre-qualified. So we have multiple vendors who 5 have already been qualified and awarded the contract, and this will be the 6th. But essentially, you have 6 people holding a $250,000 contract, when in fact, all 6, the aggregate cannot exceed a $250,000. I think this is a routine adding a qualified vendor to an existing contract, and I would recommend that that this should be handled at the committee level and not referred for the commission because of its routine.
Okay. And so can you give me an example of a company that would be bidding on this, on direct support professionals? Give me just an example of like, so this would be a private provider.
Private provider.
Okay. And are there lots of private providers that provide this? I mean, I just was kind of
I got my backup out here.
curious,
But
just to understand it.
You have vendors who are, they come on up and then Mike, you get it exactly right first.
Thanks.
So these are the temp agencies. Majority of temp agencies already have statewide contracts through MMO.
Okay, yeah.
Right now, that contract does not provide medical professionals, so each agency has to solicit for medical professionals. In this case, we have put out a solicitation that was published through the state procurement office. And so once we have a provider that's interested or company that's interested to provide services for DDSN, they submit the bid response, and you have companies like Apple One or some type of staffing company that has healthcare professionals.
Okay.
So we look at their response, and typically it's consistent of them being able to hire temp nurses or LPNs and RNs to provide services for DDSN, and we're hiring or contracting with this temp service, not individuals themselves.
Right.
So,
Okay. And so direct support professionals is typically nursing.
well, we have 2. We have
Okay.
direct support, and then we have like a nursing.
Okay, gotcha. So totally.
Here as well. So it's 2 different contracts.
Okay.
Because the qualifications or the scope of work is different, because, you know, with the nursing, they require licenses, and for direct support, they don't.
Right. So that would be item B on this list. Okay.
So for direct support, for A, you know, it's just direct support individuals who are able to find individuals to hire through their agency.
Right.
And then we contract with the agency.
Right. But the specific service that a direct support professional is delivering is what? No, it's not nursing. I know it's like, give me an example, just some.
I'm not sure as far as what they do at the centers, but they provide support for the centers for the consumers.
Okay.
So the agencies that we could contract with would be like consolidated, nursing or industrial nursing,
Right.
health care services or something like that.
Okay. So technically, it's a contract with the temp agency.
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah, to
To
fill
find individuals
these,
who
right,
are interested in.
at the residential, primarily the residential centers. Correct. All right, thank you for that additional info as we look at this. So at the current, I'm just reading through the details of the A. Pat, at the current time, one additional vendor has applied to be qualified in order to fix bid contract.
We have no reason to limit these vendors anyway, right?
No,
Okay.
I think the next one will illustrate how it works.
Okay. All right, so
Hey,
do you just want
Robin,
to move to the next
Robin.
one? Yeah,
Hey, Rob, this is Gary. Sorry, I had to
yeah.
call in via phone. I wanted to let you know here. There's something wrong with without letting us. Just because I'm here.
Okay, thank you for saying that, because I didn't realize that you had joined, and I also see Barry also has logged in. So thank you for that. Okay. So then we'll move to the next item and then just go through each one and then determine which ones we want to.
All right. The next one, the solicitation in 193 is a lot like the one we just talked about, except contracting for direct support. This is going to be contracting for licensed nursing personnel. This contract was originated on 7/13 of 2020, and 10 providers have already been qualified for the contract. What you have here is the 11th person asking to be added to the contract.
Okay.
And so, again, the contract has a ceiling of $291,616. By adding this person to the contract, it just gives them an opportunity for us to purchase from them. There's no guarantee of purchases.
Right. Okay. All right.
And
the third one.
Third one is our engineering division has they have a 2-year indefinite delivery contract, which looks a lot like a fixed bid contract, where they procure the services of electrical engineering services over a 2-year period, and it's for a contract limit of $200,000. Again, it's our discretion to purchase. It does not require a purchase. Because of the technical requirements of this contract, the contract is procured by the state engineering office on behalf of DDSN. So they would solicit competition. They would qualify people on our contract, so that once they're qualified based on the conditions of our contract, then our engineering division can procure off that list for electrical engineering services. And a lot of times we pick them, they just help us with a variety of short-term issues of assessment and helping us make determinations as to the course of action with a particular issue. And this is a 2-year rollover. We're basically replacing the one that we had the prior year. And the prior year, we spent, the prior 2-year contract that's expiring, we spent $130,000. In this particular case, we know for certain, given the Coastal and Midland Center's electrical grid projects, that we will be spending money out of here from CPIP contracts we're procuring from this existing contract.
Okay. All right. Does anyone have any questions on this? It seems that each one of these, in my opinion, are pretty routine in nature. I would think that this committee would approve this and just inform the commission based on the routine nature of these 3 service contracts that Pat has presented to us today. Does anybody have any questions on any of these or feel differently about any of these? That Pat has outlined for us.
No, I don't have any. I would say that I would make a motion that we make all these routine section of our report and bring it to the next commission meeting. But I wanted to ask, it says 18 people are on this, a minute ago, it's this thing said 18 people. Is 18 people on this call, or is 18 people apparently listening in?
I don't know what 18 you're mentioning. Where do you see 18?
It was on my, well, it's gone now, but it was on the side of this camera. I mean, on the side of this.
Madam Chairman, this is
Yeah.
Commissioner Rollins, and yes, this is an open meeting to the public, so the public are here viewing it.
That's what I saw as well.
Okay.
Okay, so Barry, we
So
were
this
just
thing
told
counts how many
there
people's
were-
on here, I guess. Go ahead, what?
No, we were just told that 45 people are on this call right now, this meeting. I'm not sure what you saw for 18 a little while ago, but 45 is the total listening in,
Okay,
which
good.
I think is pretty typical.
Yes.
Yeah, for these meetings. So I don't know, maybe you're seeing something different since we're using a new
Well, I did, but
system.
it disappeared now. So I was just curious to know what it meant, but go ahead.
Okay,
I think the difference is a lot of times there was a separate invite for those of us participating as opposed to those who were just watching, and it looks like everything's all combined into one right now.
Okay.
That's correct. It removes some confusion as far as which links to join, and the transition to Teams allows for a single pane of glass, but have the same functionality.
I guess I was just making sure the ones I see are the ones that are participating. Is that what we're saying?
You're seeing the people that are participating from the public and some employees as well.
Okay.
okay. So now there are no other questions about the non-new service contracts. Do we want to move into, I think, you actually, Barry, said you want to make a motion to.
Don't we need to make a motion to make them either
Yeah.
one part of the committee report or another part? Because there's two parts of the committee report. One is routine and one is.
Yeah,
ones we want to vote on.
yes, agree. So I think if we're all in agreement that these three that Pat has brought to our attention that fall under the new non-service contracts of 200,000 or greater, if we're all in agreement that this is of routine nature in terms of contracts, and we need a motion to approve these for Pat and his team to move forward with, and then we will just bring to the commission that we advance these, but we'll need a commission vote. Does that make sense? Is that what you're saying, Barry? That's how I see it.
Yeah, in other words, they'd be voted on at one time and not individually, yes.
Right, and we would vote on it here and then just share as an FYI to the commission
Right.
next week.
Right.
Okay, so you want to make that motion and then.
Yeah, I tried to. Yeah, I'll make a motion that
Okay.
those are FYI for the commission, and we'll go from there and see if there's any difficulty.
I'll second.
All right, so Gary seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. None opposed, then we'll approve these three items, Pat.
Okay.
Next.
The next contract is part of an existing CPEP, and we separate these only because CPEPs are they're capital projects, and
What does it stand for again? Capital
Capital permanent improvement project.
okay, capital permanent improvement
No,
projects.
I'll find the backup now. Let me get back.
Just for the
Right.
acronym discussion that we all struggle with from time to time. Capital
Permanent improvement.
permanent improvement projects. Okay, CPIP.
I elevate CPIPs to a higher level than other non-service contracts, only because the state government really monitors when agencies spend funds for capital improvements. We really want to keep capital improvements, I don't say to a minimum, but reasonable, because if we expand too much, then we got to maintain space that is very costly. This is a CPIP that was approved on May 21st of 2020. And the scope was to replace 26 variable air volume terminals with associated energy management controls at the center dorm 206.
205?
205?
Yeah.
Glasses on.
It's okay.
Thank you for that. The project was bid out through the normal SKIBO process, and we received a bid. The bid was within our expected budget range for $224,460, and it was to Gregory Electric Company of Columbia, South Carolina. This project was delayed due to COVID. That's why it's taking a year to get to this level. Now we're rolling. The way I would caveat this is it appears to be routine. However, it's a CPIP project. So as we're going through this new process, I would ask us to consider the precedent of whenever we have contracts over $300,000 pertaining to a CPIP, do we want to treat them the same? This has a normal quality to it, or because it's a CPIP, we do want to bring it in front of the commission, only because capital projects are scrutinized more by state government, central authorities. My recommendation would be to bring it to the full commission, only because, Andrew, what do you think?
Yeah, that's typically the way we've
It
done
was
it.
done in the past.
All right. So when we approved this project on May 21st, what exactly did we approve on May
We
21st?
approved the concept operation and we approved allocating funds toward it.
Okay,
Now, we're in the execution phase.
right.
Now we have to actually get contracts to do work. And as we get contracts, if they exceed $200,000, we have to come back for approval for the $200,000 contracts. So the concept is just letting us, yes, it's a good idea to do the capital project. And now we're in the execution phase.
And it fell under like, HVAC stuff. When I try to look to see what like, replace, terminal air volume, I imagine that that's basically also known as the air conditioning system.
Yeah, VAV system, the VAV boxes is real similar to the type of system we've got here at central office. It's boxes in the ceiling that regulate the airflow into the space.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's HVAC. So.
Okay, gotcha. Just making sure I'm on the same page. All right, so does anyone have any questions for Pat? Because we'll want to make a motion to approve this today.
Andrew will do the full presentation at the committee meeting.
Okay, and Andrew will do a full presentation at the commission meeting for us. But anybody have any questions right now? Because basically we just need to approve this to move forward to bring to the commission to vote as a full commission based on the amount, $224,000, right? 460.
I move to
Good question.
approve the bid as presented.
Okay. All right, a second.
Second.
Okay, if no one else has any comments or questions, then can get a in favor of approving this. Can I hear who approves it? Can I get ayes for that?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so we are going to approve this expense for the Witness Center Dorm 205, and we'll bring to the commission for a full vote this month. Okay. Thank you. All right, so I think that's everything under the
I will add
contracts. Okay.
a little footnote at the bottom of the report says, in July of every year, we'll run a report of all contracts that aggregate over 200,000
Okay, for the quarter or for the year?
for the year.
Okay,
Because you're looking at everything 200,000. We could have a lot of contracts that are 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. We want to keep vision on those that
right.
get over 200. So we're going to run a report this month and I'll get it to you and we'll talk about it next meeting.
Thank you. All right, sounds good. All right, so the next item on our agenda is a cost report update by Pat.
The fiscal year 19 cost report is complete. And I'm going to push the button and have it appear and send it to HHS.
Okay,
They're waiting for it. It's going to play a pivotal role in their rate assessments for a lot of the activity in the IDRD waiver. I don't want to, publish the number because it's still, the way it works is we have our cost report. HHS will pull together the Medicaid billings that go against it. And then you put the two together to see who owes what. But at the same time, what I can say is the preliminary report is that there is excessive cost in the system, as we've been talking about for years. That gives us postures us to get rate increases with existing funds already in the system. I think it's good news that it's helped us going forward. It's bad news that we did not match as well as we could have in the past. Fiscal year 13 and 14 are complete. I have to do my due diligence review, and once I do it, I will send it over to them. I expect that to be this week or early next week. And we have a new cost reporting process that is fabulous, but it is somewhat tedious. And once you go hang on the work papers, these two will go much faster. 15 is all but done. I figure we should be able to
By the end of July.
End of July. No one's waiting for that report, although I think we have to button this all down to help HHS wrap up some of the decisions that were made in 2012 and 13 they're waiting for, but they're all lining up like that.
Okay. Any questions on cost reports from anyone on the commission? All right.
Yeah, we're not, are we gonna have any idea about our liability regarding cost reports over the next like 6 months or so?
We should have, I can talk to you offline. I think it is not significant risk. Until HHS commits to what the Medicaid, we have our estimate of what it is. And for 13, I don't see a huge amount. For 19, I see next to nothing. So it's going to be some, but not a lot. And there's even some inference after talking to HHS about a different way to look at it, where it's never going to go to a two-way settlement where they're going to give us money. But at least there's a possibility that we might have excessive cost in one cost settlement that might be able to cover a liability in another, but that was just general talk that we have to pursue. But I can.
Okay, I'll talk to you about it more another day. Sorry.
All right. So once we're caught up, what will be the normal system of cost reports?
The normal system should be, we close the year on June 30th. The providers get us their cost reports by October 31st. And we should have a product by, I think, February.
Okay, the following year. Okay.
Yes, and then that way it puts us in a position to stay on top of rate issues.
Okay, so every February we should
have the preceding fiscal year's report.
Cost report. Okay. All right. Okay, if no other questions on cost reports, then we'll move to item 7 on our agenda, which is the fee for service update. And Pat.
As you're aware, the last step is to get out of the residential bands and into residential individual rates for our fee for service settings. And I think Susan briefed us at the last commission meeting, and we talked about it, that they slowed down the Ib Rdu renewal to allow us to go bold, if you will, because some of our 10% FMAP money and some of our 6.2% FMAP money puts us in a position to maybe use those funds to really move the system forward with enhanced services. And HHS has been very supportive, but they still do have deadlines on the Ib Rdu renewal. Challenge is to get with 14 residential bands that we're trying to consolidate into 8 individual settings that we want to get into the Ib Rdu renewal. And that process starts with establishing how they work. We already do these services, but you need specific data points in order to develop a rate. And the bottleneck has been, since we've been allowed to do this, is establishing staffing levels at each tiered rate, meaning how many hours a day does a band G low need in a house? 20, meaning one per shift is 24 hours. And then you go up a level of need, a band H, how many staff do they need in the house on average? And to get those two data points, we have nothing in our directives or standards requirements that identify that. We've been very loose in our approach, where we basically allow providers to make their own independent decisions. And there is really no documentation at the provider level as to, they document the schedule. Does not mean that schedule correlates with assessment of individual needs. They should. The bottom line is we do not have good data sets as to what is the staffing level for each level, particularly low and medium. Now, when it comes to the high management and forensic group, which is a very small population,
Right.
we do have a contract that requires 40 hours in the house a day, which is a 2 on first shift, 2 on second shift, 1 on third shift. But we have to work on the bottom two. And until last week, we were in a position to, because we have no internal data sets, to rely on national norms, national standards, get a consultant to help us figure out what our options are. We met with a consultant, I think last Wednesday, and he kind of opened our mind to, hey, you know, South Carolina, you get to decide. And I think with a little bit of thinking, HHS and permitted us to do 2 focus groups with our provider network tomorrow. And in there, we're going to tease out these issues and ask the questions and the hard questions as to what is staffing today and what is staffing going forward. Because what we're staffing today does not necessarily mean we're actually meeting needs. It's just that's what they're staffing based on funds available. So we're going to have those discussions tomorrow, and we're going to tease out those 2 issues among these settings so that we can then provide it to HHS, and then they can take it into the rate setting process for the individual settings. Make no bones about it. We are under tight deadlines. And we're given till this Friday to get this done. And I think we'll be able to make that deadline with the information we have. But we don't have much margin for error to keep these individual settings flowing through the IDRD waiver renewal.
So do the requests that we get with outliers on a pretty typical basis or year, does any of that information help fuel this discussion?
No.
No.
I think in many respects, we're just stuck doing what we've always done.
Yeah.
If you take Band G's, the average daily rate is $245.
Yeah.
Band H's are $275. High management is $300.
Right.
Forensic is $400. But when you take the first 3 rates, 245, 275, 300, I think going forward with the right procedures in place, you know, we should not be splitting hairs about throwing, you know, giving outliers to a band H. Basically, if you meet certain criteria, you go up a band, because when you start putting outliers into the equation, you either have to have Medicaid sophistication in your billing where you have modifiers where we can get matched, or if you move them up a tier, you're putting them in a new tier of service because they have higher needs and they get matched. We have to get away from just putting state money into the pot because somebody's in between levels of service. You follow me?
Yeah.
So what we need to do is build these with staffing levels, and then we got to build procedures around them so that asking for an outlier is a true exception, as opposed to
The norm.
it's not even a norm, but just
I
think most people would rather, most systems would rather, if there's a need, we should build a system that can accommodate the Medicaid match. What we've done in the past is we had a need, we didn't have the system, so we used state funds. So
Right.
I think achieving this objective now in the current system, I believe in the future, we will mature these, whatever we decide now,
Mhm.
if we can get it in. There's no guarantee we're going to get them in, but we're going to try our darndest. If in the future, all of a sudden we develop a comprehensive assessment tool. Comprehensive assessment tool allows us to place people in settings with a higher level of accuracy. We might be able to add modifiers. We might be able to have different rates based on a rural provider versus a metropolitan provider. But I don't, it's not gonna get in this waiver, but you can mature it once it's in the waiver. But the key for us to go to fee for service and properly match our state funds, we've got to get individual settings in the IDRD waiver with individual rates. And so that's the step that we're working on at this moment.
Okay. Anybody have any questions about that? Or just anything regarding fee for service for Pat?
Well, waiver, my God, my mind just went blank.
IDRD waiver?
No,
Renewal?
I was trying to say that, my God, my mind, I may have to go under the desk. My mind just went blank. That's what I'm trying to say is that we need to figure out, as soon as we go to fee for service, which I'm hoping is sooner rather than later, and I personally think that this CARES Act should speed that up dramatically because of the money that's been poured into the system. But outliers are a thing of the past at that point. And so what word again do we use instead of outliers? And I'm hoping that would be used a lot less, by the way. But what word do we use whenever you're fee for service instead of outlier?
There's two ways. One would be if somebody is in a particular tier need and they have an event that causes a higher level of cost, then they would trigger a modifier so they get paid extra, and it could only be temporary. It could come back down. You can also build a system to where you might have a level of need and you may establish staffing levels, and once you cross that certain threshold, you go to the next tier up. So there's not a gap. Basically you're from tier to tier, and you don't have that in between extra funding. So there's multiple ways to do it. In the short run, we just want to get individual rates in the system with staffing levels so they can price them. And we will have to build procedures around them to answer some of those questions. But using outliers needs to be a remote situation and not a frequent situation.
And I think I've heard Barry say before that once we go completely to fee for service, we won't have cost reports. Did I remember him saying that one time?
No, I didn't say cost reports. I said you wouldn't have outliers.
Okay.
You shouldn't have outliers when you go to fee for service. If they want to call it modifiers, they can, but we really should just use a different tier.
That's exactly.
Okay.
It's what you would use in a fee for service situation, so you don't have all this extra money floating around. Everybody knows exactly what people are getting paid for what, and that's that. It's much more transparent in a fee for service world. See what I'm saying? Because you don't.
Yeah.
People aren't getting money from all different sources and fee and ways and go and all that. They just get it from one way, and that's it.
Gotcha.
They get it for the service they provide, and if that's an additional fee because this person's needs more money, then they get a different tier of fee. Is that correct, Pat?
I think that's the direction.
That's basically what you just said in the second part of what you said, right?
Yes, that's the direction.
Right.
Hopefully we can modify some of those sophistications into it, but first things first, we're just trying to get in the waiver with rates and individual settings, and I think that will solve 95% of the problems.
And how do we know if we got that wrong after we do that? Like, what's the, you said we come up with an individual rates and get those into the system. Like,
it's
like, how do we know if there's going to be whatever we came up with isn't what really works, or, what they need or whatever. I don't know. What would be
the rate setters set the rates.
Right.
And we're presuming rates go up. I'm not, the rate setter set the rates.
Right.
I think there's reason to go up.
Right.
And once they set those rates,
yeah,
then what we have to do in a very short amount of time is we know where all our people are in what settings. We got to run those rates to see what's the impact on each provider, because the providers have different portfolios.
Right.
You may have a provider that serves one particular type setting, like a CTH1.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if that doesn't, what if that loses a few dollars? That's that, everybody else is going up, but they figure
Yeah,
that's
right.
low. On average, it went up 10%, but that one setting went down 1%. That affects that provider. So we have to do some sensitivity testing so that we can hopefully nobody gets hurt and hopefully it increases, the water level goes up. But at the end of the day, the services are, the actual service descriptions have to be written. They're going to be similar to what we have now, but with greater specificity. Like right now, we don't have staffing levels. So that's the big one that we're dealing with now. But there are also some other smaller issues that I think policy division has to work on as far as what needs between levels. What are there different ways to address needs between levels and how does that price out? That is, we're working on that this week as well.
Yeah.
This is, I think, the big issue of getting these staffing levels reasonable. And I believe once we establish what they are, I feel certain that HHS with their consultant Milliman have enough national data to see where we are compared to other states, what's reasonable. I can look around other states and tell you what they do.
Right.
And that'll be a good starting point for our group. But it's just a data input so that they can get going. And if they don't have this data input, they can't get going. And until we made this, what I would say, decision to use this type of input, we were kind of in a very difficult spot because we had not been able to get a good grip on what national standards are.
Right.
But I think this will help us move forward.
So our next critical deadline with DHHS on this topic is
Friday.
Okay. For this week. Okay. All right. Anybody have any other questions for fee for service before we moved to the next item?
No, I don't.
Alright.
Can I say something really quick? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Is Mike around? Mike, Mickey?
Yes.
Man, the reason I keep looking away, if anybody wonders, is because y'all's screen is so blurry. I cannot, even though I'm trying to look at you, I can't see you. And it was perfect whenever I got on, and I don't know why it's gotten all of a sudden blurry. And I just wondered if anybody knew.
Okay, I'll take a look at it.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Barry, some of that may be latency on your end. I sort of get the same thing I notice sometimes, but a lot of times it's on the throughput on my end as opposed to anything at DDSN central office.
Okay, well, just look at it and see. It might be me. It might be my fault. Go ahead.
But I'm seeing some of the same thing. I know what you're talking about.
It's very blurry, and it was perfect at one time. But anyway, when I got on. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, for what it's worth, Gary is blurry to me, and Barry is pretty clear. So anyway,
it's not a big deal. It's just hard to see. I mean, it's hard to look
I
at. That's
know.
why I'm looking away. It's the only reason, in case somebody out there wonders why Barry is looking, his head is caught one way. It's because I'm having to look away from the screen. Go ahead. It's not because I'm upset or jumping around or anything like that. Go ahead.
I think it's somewhere in the internet speed. I don't think it's like a camera problem. I'll say that.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So Pat,
Moving on.
item
Sorry.
8. No, it's good. With technology, we're trying to improve and it's changing all the time. So things are, it is what it is. But
After all,
And
it's
Mike
actually
is trying to help us, and we appreciate that.
it's actually better for
Yeah,
y'all
true.
if I'm blurred. So
right. Thanks, Gary.
All right.
All right, Pat.
Number 8 is, I'm not looking for any votes here. I'm really just to give you the mechanics because this is frequently talked about this time of year, so you understand the mechanics. I will be asking for some input on one area that we have to make a decision on. But let me just do one at a time. In the fiscal year 22 appropriations, we got a $10 million residential rate increase, which is a 3.4% increase. Given the fact that we are not in the, we don't have individual rates yet. If we did, it would be January 1st. I have to engage HHS on our single rate, which is $196 a day, and do the math and ask them for a rate increase. And then not only do I ask them for a rate increase, because when we're appropriated funds, we're only appropriated the state match, expecting that the rate goes up and we get the federal match. Also, I need to inquire from them, this has generally been the practice, that they will pay the rate increase back retrospectively to July 1st. But before I can act, I have got to meet with them with the rate and get their assurances of how they want to handle it. One of our problems since 2013 forward is the inexact science between agencies on doing this. And there's been slippage, there's been miss rates, and going forward, we just want to be as clear as we can to them as to this is what we need, this is when we need it. And if they say they're not going to make it retroactive, then I have the expectation they're going to do it, but I don't want to be putting money into the system like we've done in the past without getting their okay. What ends up happening is we put money in the system, and if things work out, and we may get the rate increase, but it may not be retro to July 1st, and that's where we get our base of it. So just give me a couple of weeks to work with them on a rate and the mechanics of it all. And it's a tedious process, and but we honed a lot of the issues 2 years ago. We had rate increases, and it was a challenging fall, but we learned a lot. So this time, hopefully, we can take those lessons learned and save a lot of time. But it's not as simple as taking that money and putting the work on July 1st, because we're in an awkward situation where we may get the legislative appropriations, but we don't have control of changing the rate to get the match. And HHS has been very helpful with us. So just give me a couple of weeks to work with them to find timing. Let me jump to the part of the appropriation of the 2.5% increase for our provider network. Residential day, case management, early intervention. And it's the same tediousness of how do we implement that? The legislation, and Deborah, you can help me, is it will go back to the first pay date
in July. So it does encompass days worked in June.
Right. So the bottom line is it has to be retrospectively paid. And the first step is providers are turning in their full-time equivalent reports. They report how many people work for them and their salaries. We find that information and we get an estimate of the state funds we need to have that 2.5% increase. And then we turn that over to the executive budget office. And by the end of August, they appropriate those funds. And then our job is to get rate increases so we get the federal match. And, but in this case, it's unequivocal. We need to pay the providers back to the first full pay period in July. And so once we get the executive budget office information together, and I have an estimate, which may be at the commission meeting, or certainly it'll be at the next finance meeting, I think then we're in the fork of the road where we may go ahead and fund that because we have to fund it. You follow me? And I wouldn't want providers to wait 2 months while we're still messing around with rates. So we can cross that bridge when we get to it, but we'll still have to do the math with HHS to get the rate increases.
So how do we deal with, like when you said you mentioned that we have to find out, to work with them to see how many people work for them and gather that employee kind of factor in things. Because of the climate that we're in right now, I imagine that most of them are down people. I know I hear numbers like 40 people,
Unbelievable.
Fewer employees this month than this time last year, and so forth and so on. How are you going to consider that this current environment into and asking for a number of employees when it's what time frame are you looking at when you say what are the number of your
When
employees?
they ask for FTEs, correct me if I'm wrong there, but they're asking for the baseline numbers or the number on the books today.
Now, generally what you'll see is you get the files back from them. If they have vacancies that are in certain departments, they'll say 3 vacancies and they'll show 3 FTEs.
Okay.
So they should give to us the data in which not just that they currently have, but what they should have at full capacity.
And plan on fit.
That's correct.
Okay. All right.
And
Okay.
then the last one is where I need some input from the committee. And this is, we got $7.2 million in respite. And the logic for this ask was to increase, the logic, right now we have one rate that pays $12.69, and it is used by individuals who are, we call it family arranged or self-directed respite. It's also used by businesses. The problem is that $12.69 rate is so low, you can't attract businesses to provide respite. And if they do provide respite, they do it in conjunction with PCA, and they have to wrap around a bunch of things. We have an access problem, which forces more of our individuals to use self-directed, only because that was the only mechanism available to them to get respite. What we want to do is take the $6.2 million and develop a second rate so that we have a business rate and a self-directed rate. And the only way, and so in the IDRD waiver renewal, we're asking for a second rate, a second respite rate called business rate. And that rate obviously would be higher than the self-directed because businesses have a certain surplus profit motive just to be in the game. And so that would be, and we've done some projections. I can't predict what it would be, but it would be, I think, closer to PCA than not. Like maybe the 15.80. I think in our budget ask, it was $15.80, $16 range. And our current respite is at $12.69. And that $12.69 doesn't even cover our costs.
How long have we had that rate?
A long time.
Okay.
As long as I've been here.
Okay.
And we're actually using state funds because the minimum you pay caregivers $11.30. Then DDSN pays the 15.3% business tax. And then we pay the fiscal administrator, which is about 20 cents per unit, or it's a very small number. But totally, our unit cost is about $13.40. And 69. So what we want to do is take the available money, and for our current rate, the decision that we have to make, and we want to make it sooner rather than later,
Right.
is raise our current rate up so that we cover our own costs, so that we're not paying state funds, we get it matched. And secondly, that the 1130 caregiver, in my opinion, I mean, they got to get some raise in there. And the question is, where do we stop? And the decision points are, hey, we can afford $13. Well, if you go to $13, then direct care people would leave their posts to become respite workers. And secondly, the higher you go, you defeat the purpose of two rates, because what you're doing is you're all of a sudden you're creating the self-directed market is so important, and that the rate is so much higher than a business can offer, because the business might only be able to pay people $11.15.
Right.
And if they're paying $11.15, this one's paying $13. Your basic people who may want to get respite providers locally. And again, part of this whole industry is when you talk about respite providers, you may be a respite provider, but generally speaking, if you want respite services, you bring your caregiver to the respite provider and they hire them back to you.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with this whole process.
And so the whole purpose of this is create access so that families can have a local brick and mortar facility.
Right.
To get their caregivers qualified in 2 or 3 days, as opposed to a longer period of time.
Yeah.
And we want to have the rate for the self-directed and the business at some close equilibrium, so people have choice. And that's what we're shooting for. So I believe that 1130 needs to go up, but it's got to stop at some level well short of 13. And that's the decision that we have to make, and we need to get input on that.
Is a rate setter going to give us some ideas on this, or?
We have to propose the rate. I mean, that's our job, is to propose it. We got the money, now we got to propose it.
Okay, and then they will give us their feedback.
Believe me, it's their decision, but we have to have a basis as to what we're going to propose.
Okay, so of all of the respite, active respite users in the DDSN system, what percentage falls in the home directed and what percentage falls into the business model, the provider model, the companies that are willing to run a respite program?
There's three models.
Okay,
One is self-directed, and we can get you a number on that.
We don't have it right off.
I'd love to know, because I think that's
I do
gonna
too.
play in a little bit to what we
Then you have
determine.
businesses. And the businesses that provide it, like they may be a
Yeah.
PCA provider and they provide respite too.
Yes,
And then we have about 10 boards.
right,
One or two boards run it like a business
Yeah.
where they hire people and they do.
mhm,
The other boards do it a variety of ways,
okay,
but, and I've talked to most of them about this, they're almost doing it at a loss or
Right.
certainly no revenue. They're doing it as a service to their people.
right,
And even they are trying to get out of it because
right,
once we left the capitated model, they couldn't afford to do it anymore.
right,
But they're still doing it because they're great people and they want to serve their community.
right,
And I think they're slowly getting out of it.
right,
But if we raise the rate, they may stay in it.
yeah,
And even importantly, we might attract 7 or 8, 9 more boards
right.
to stay in it. So we'll get you all three numbers. I asked that question the other week.
Yeah, I'd
And-
also like to look at a breakdown of the rural areas versus the metropolitan areas, and if the percentage of what people are doing based on those areas, because I feel like that tells us the picture as well. For example, if there is a rural area, let's say Hampton County, they only have one respite provider, and most of the respite and the people that use respite have their own and they fall into the other category of the home directed. That would tell me we need more respite options in there. I mean, there's pros and cons with everything. A lot of people don't want to do in-home, and they don't have the time, the energy to oversee your home directed. It's still a lot of work, even
Yes.
though it is, a great option for families to have. It's not a easy thing for everybody to do. So a lot of people don't do it, which means they need providers in their community to provide it,
Yes.
because they don't want that option.
And take that load off of them.
Yes, because it's still, I mean, it's there's things you have to do with it that, anyway, so I'd be interested to kind of look deeper at how people are using it, what kinds of percentages fall in each area, where their respite, provider needs. And this may not really necessarily just answer your question about what to do with the 7.2, but it might give us a bigger picture of a problem that we need to solve. It's not going away that we don't have enough providers. So
We have a report that we did a pretty big deep dive several years ago
okay,
that drove us in this direction. And I don't know if things have changed or not, but we can get you that data and we'll get it to you, and hopefully we can have some informal discussions. I'll talk to the associations, but ultimately I have to propose something.
right.
And I think we're meeting on the 15th with HOS, so I
Yeah.
have some time.
And respite, all in all, when done correctly in terms of what it does for the families, it improves their quality of life and their independence and their ability to function as normal as possible with the right supports in the home, so that they can, be productive individuals in the society, and the family unit can work as best as it can based on the circumstances that they're dealing with. It's the way to keep, the families in their homes, not in residential settings, because their family feels supported. And so it's, I think, really important to solve the respite challenges as a whole and the issues surrounding it, because it's a key, from my own personal experiences in the family that I meet along the way and that I've met through the years. Having this service through DDSN is oftentimes a central program that brings their family help throughout the day, throughout the week, that they would otherwise not get.
Mhm.
And it provides more stress to the family than necessary, not having some help, some quality help.
Mhm.
Obviously, there's lots of issues with that as well in terms of, making sure we get respite workers that, are trained and reliable and all those things that have to come along with that as well. So, but in a perfect world, you'd have all that and the families would feel supported in their homes, taking care of their families' needs and being able to function as successfully as possible in the community. So,
Ms.
what
Chairman,
do you need us to
Ms.
talk,
Chairman,
give you
this is
specific
Commissioner Rawlinson.
input on today? So, yeah, Stephanie?
Yeah, this is Commissioner Rawlinson. I do agree with you, Robin. And like I said, I try not to chime in too much, but I do want to add that it is very, very difficult for families to find respite providers. That is the one thing we have heard through all of our listening sessions, is that respite providers are almost impossible to find. And like you said, I agree with Robin. No matter what we have to do, we need to figure this problem out. And if that means we need to have a different rate for metropolitan as opposed to rural areas, then that's what we're going to have to do. Because we can't continue to let this service go unutilized the way it has been going. So just let's make an effort, Robin, whatever it takes to figure that out, and let's see if we can find some kind of solution to that. Okay.
Yep, agree.
Thanks, Robin.
Let me say one thing about that. The business rate is probably more of the solution than anything else, because getting people into business to do anything is better than government doing it. And so if the more we can get businesses to be involved with something, the better off it's going to be. That's the solution, in my opinion, more than anything else. If you get businesses involved and they can make money, that will help your problem. Now, we do have to be careful because you don't want to overdo that rate and mess up the other rates, like our executive director from Charleston was talking about, how just like what Pat was just talking about. So we've got to be very careful with this thing. But the biggest solution is that business rate.
Right, and then it's competitive, no matter which route the family decides to go. But when it comes down to it, the family can choose in-home versus a provider, business, whatever, provider of respite. So, I mean, I get that we need to, shore up the business model and get more people to provide respite. And the way they're going to do that is because they have a higher rate that makes them want to get in the business. But we also, have the needs of our individuals that we serve, and having them to have choices in their community where they live is real important as well. Because it's not, apples to apples across the board, and across the state, as we know, with everything. So, okay. So, Pat, for right now, what, did you need anything additional from us on this, or?
Part of the, the executive limitations, before we propose a rate, you guys got to be good with the rate.
Right.
And so this is kind of the warm up.
Okay.
I'm gonna do the data collection for you, and we'll meet with HHS, and, and at some point, it'll settle around something that we need to vote on.
Right. Okay.
If they need more certainty sooner, we'll just do what we have to do. But
Right.
the first thing is to meet with them, because they're the rate setters and they'll give us guidance. But we have the funding. Now we just gotta, they're adding a second rate in the Ib Rdu waiver renewal. As far as I know, we proposed it in the process, and that will give us the two rates. So on January 1st, we'll really be in a position to build that greater access.
Yeah.
But in the short term, we still have to do something with the single rate, because we can move that up. We can move that up some, but we can't move it up too far for fear of of creating a disequilibrium. So I
Right.
think we got to find that tipping point.
Okay, sounds good. All right, if those are all the three main mechanics that you wanted to share with us on that topic, we can move to the next topic. Family arranged caregiver hourly rate.
I kind of blended that in. with
Okay.
the-
Okay, so we already talked about that. Okay, gotcha. Yeah, makes sense. Okay, so the 10th item on the agenda is the CFO report for Pat.
I just got 4 quick updates. This month, we're going to do some PPP testing on cost reports. We're going to look at 19 cost reports, 20 cost reports, and in an ideal world, the percentage of cost compared to our band payments is the same, which would mean that we don't have any reason to believe that diverting our expenses to cover PPP forgivable loans. But we'll do that testing this month, and then at the next August finance meeting, we will share the results with the provider network, and we will just have to go from there.
So I know last year, one of the discussions we had around PPP loans was our concern about, different providers self-reporting on whether they got the PPP loans or not, because we might not know or if they did or didn't early on when everything was kind of happening with the PPP loans. So do we feel good about the 19 to 20 number of those being the all comprehensive of the ones that got the
We have a list
PPP?
of 15 providers, board providers.
Okay,
And really the board providers, because it affects cost reports.
right,
If they divert our costs as costs that they use for these PPP loans to forgive the loans, that's costs that we don't have in our cost report.
Right.
And that's what they've been told multiple times in many very clear ways.
okay,
And again, it's, we're not down there with a scalpel. We just want to make sure if what you did in 19 looks like 20, we're feeling pretty good that
Right.
maybe you didn't, that there is not a huge diversion. But if it drops off precipitously, now we're saying, hey, where did the cost go?
right,
And if it ends up on their forgivable loan, hey, that's our cost for our system, because that's how we get rates. So
right,
Okay. We just got to test it before we see what the next steps are. But this
okay,
first test will give us a water temperature as to whether we have a problem or not.
okay,
And I want to do it this month because providers are already doing their fiscal year 20 audits now. So if there's a problem, I want to know in July to let them know there's a problem so they don't repeat the problem, because in fiscal year 20, that PPP loan period straddled both fiscal years. And so I don't want them to repeat if there is a problem.
right. Okay,
We talked about, we looked at the community ICFs and saw there was a disequilibrium there, and that we addressed it with bed fees. The second half of that is to meet with providers and collect what we consider is fair data for a fair market rate in the future. Again, we're not rate setters, but we have an affirmative duty to collect objective data to marshal and compare to rates to see if in fact there is an issue there. And I can tell you, looking at the fiscal year 19 cost reports, there was a big disequilibrium in 19. At the end of 19, HHS, thankful to them, gave us a rate increase. I think the rate increase probably helped us, but we're still a little bit underwater. So we just want to get ahead of the curve for once and have good, accurate data on what the factors are of a fair rate, so that as we continue the process of engaging HHS with objective data, they can raise the rate or not. That's their call. We got to be armed with what's fair data. So we're going to do that. I do not have a cash balance for you right now. We're in the middle of year-end closing. But I can tell you that the two big receivables, we had about $10 million that HHS is going to pay us for our administrative contract and our Greenwood genetic contract, and we have received those funds. So we will have substantial year-end cash balance at 50-50.
yeah, right. Okay. All right, well, that's good to hear, for sure. All right. Okay, does anybody have any questions for Pat on any of these items? Or need further details on anything?
No, I just had
All
one
right.
thing I wanted.
Okay,
I'm sorry I wasn't here at the very beginning of the meeting, but because I would have added this to the agenda at that time, but if there's no objection, obviously if there is an objection, we don't have to do it. But I just wanted to add one little quick topic to the agenda if I could, and it is the committee procedures. We need to go, I would recommend strongly that we put committee procedures on the next meeting so that, because technically at the first meeting of each committee, we're supposed to go over our committee procedures. It's in our policies so that we can get those, so we can make sure those are straight as far as our policy is concerned. And this is the policy committee chairman talking, so sorry, but we're supposed to have that straight. So next meeting, we need to do that, please.
okay. All right. Yeah, well, I'll talk to you about that so I can make sure I'm on the same page
Yeah,
with
I'll
you on
talk to you
that.
about that. I'd love to
Okay.
talk to you about that. It's wonderful.
Okay, okay, all right.
You'll understand what
Our
I mean in
next-
5 seconds flat.
Okay, all right. Okay, well then, if no one else has any comments or suggestions or additions to anything, our next meeting is August the 3rd, and if I can get a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second?
Second.
All right. All in favor say aye.
Hi.
None opposed? Any opposed? Then we will adjourn this meeting at 4:13. Thank you so much for all that called in and listened. Appreciate it.